Hey, Clear Lake peeps. Ross Langan here with Clear Lake Guide Service. I kind of opened my mouth with the report for this last Thursday and said I'd do another one of these and just talk a little bit about my view on the fishing and really what's going on here on the lake. So you, in true fashion, you folks have held me to it. So I guess I got to do it. So let's talk about it. I'm not going to talk about the conditions, water level, any of that kind of stuff. We're just going to talk about my impression of what's happened over the last couple weeks on the bite here on Clear Lake. The one thing that I have to say right off the bat, having a full lake again, awesomely wonderful. And I'll tell you that there's a lot of stuff just over the past 2 years that I think a lot of us have just forgotten about. A really good example of this is as I'm running around up in shallow water looking, man, I am seeing everything. I'm seeing bass. I'm seeing a fairly decent number of crappie, seeing some bluegill, seeing some red ears, seeing hitch, goldfish, monstrous carp. I mean, a few catfish, probably just about at least half of the species of fish that live in the lake I've seen in the last couple of weeks. Some of them in pretty big numbers, others not so much. So there's a lot of critters swimming around out in the water. It still doesn't change my opinion or my impression of what the bass community is, but we'll take what we got, okay? So one of the things that's going on, because I keep hearing this, oh yeah, there's bass all over the place. They're up on the beds all over the place. No, they're not. And if you're, again, as always, I'm going to target this video to those of you who are out here hearing one thing and finding something different. I'll cover my results for the past couple of weeks. I've made absolutely no bones about the fact that this is the worst year that I've ever had guiding, and the lack of success with being able to be on fish, and even the sheer number of days we've fished that we couldn't even put a limit of fish in the boat. I know other people were doing it, but I was like a lot of you folks, I was having that same struggle. 2 weeks ago, stretch of really good weather. The morning air temperatures got up to where they were in the high 40s, starting to touch 50 degrees. Water temperature started coming up. Things started getting active. And all of a sudden, we went from, 5 fish was a good day to 10 fish was kind of the normal day. 10 fish, that's better than 5, but it's not what we're used to for this time of year of 20 to 30 or even more. This past week, we jumped from 10 fish a day into the 20s. Actually had a couple of days that we were pushing 30. We didn't get there, but we were close. So what happened? Well, first of all, it got hot. Water temperature warmed up. Most importantly for me, the water temperature came up and it did not mess up the visibility of what I could see in shallow water. I live all year waiting for the opportunity to be able to sight fish for bedding fish. And I don't care, mostly that's bass, but if I'm out goofing around, I'll pick off crappie too when I see them. I'll fish for the red ears, but I'm not really a good enough fisherman to catch those on a regular basis. Those are just mistakes when I get lucky enough to catch one. So I'm looking for beds. Water clarity has been pretty good on the upper end of the lake, and it didn't really make any difference whether I was on the south shore, the north shore, or the west shore. Water clarity was really pretty good. Having said that, there's areas you go through and you'll pull up and you'll think, I can't see anything. Maybe you're at the front edge of the Tules and you know it's 8 feet deep there and you can't see bottom. Going from the front of those tules all the way to the back, the water clarity changes. Usually it gets clearer on the inside of those tule beds and super clear towards the back end up in the shallowest water, assuming that the carp aren't in there tearing it all to pieces. So that's one of the things that I'm looking for, is I'm looking for clear water in shallower water. I want to be in less than 6 or 7 feet on this end of the lake. So those are the areas that I'm going to start looking. And I'm going to look around trees, I'm going to look around tules, I'm going to look around walls, I'm going to look around everything. I'm just going to put the trolling motor down and start going through areas. And you know what, if I don't see very many beds, then I'm going to pull out and I'm going to run down the bank on the big motor and pull in and try to find another area. The better days that I've had number-wise, I'm not staying in just one area, meaning I'm having to do it in part in Lakeport, in part in Lucerne, in part in Nice, or down towards the Narrows. You just have to keep moving around, because what happens this time of year is, with a lot of people, when they see a bedfish, they just camp on it and try it, and they'll spend an inordinate amount of time trying to catch it. So that's not the way I approach it. I go down the bank, and if we see a group of fish, and that's typically what happens. You'll go through a little stretch and you'll see absolutely nothing. And then you'll come into a little group and boink, 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 boink. There'll be a bed here, there'll be a bed there. And you can actually have 2 people fishing at the same time, fishing 2 separate beds. So that's how to locate them. There's so much, there's no way I can cover all this in a short video. So, those are the things that we spend time talking to clients about and trying to educate them while we're fishing. So the second biggest thing, so let me back up just a second. I don't see as many fish up on beds as what I think a normal year is. So it's not like you can just put the trolling motor down in the water and just go down the bank and at the end of the day, pull your trolling motor back up and come back. You can, but you're going to go through a lot of spots where you're not going to catch fish. So, that's something that has to be said. There's just not as many of them up. And since last week, it's really started seeing it in Thursday and Friday, water clarity started to suffer, which kind of expected, because start seeing water temperature getting up in the mid-70s in the afternoon, and whether or not there's carp there or not, all of a sudden you're not seeing more than about 4 feet, which means there's a bunch of fish that are spawning you're not even seeing, because they're just out a little bit deeper. So we keep moving around. From that point, okay, the next most common thing that I hear, we threw everything at them and we just can't catch them. It's pretty simple. They will bite almost anything if you present it correctly. Presenting it correctly is understanding that when you first see a fish on a bed, if that fish is sitting still, that's probably exactly where the bed is. And while you might be seeing, a clear spot on the bottom that's, 5 feet in diameter, there's really only one 8 to 10 inch circle in diameter within that big area that fish is trying to protect. The rest of it, honestly, most of the time he doesn't care, especially when they're as pressured as these fish are. If you find a fresh one, a new one, you can make a cast that's 4 feet away from where it needs to be, and boom, that fish will swim out and attack it. I promise you he won't do it after he's done it once. So identifying where the exact spot is that you need to fish. Beyond that, we've caught fish on Senkos, we've caught fish on small drop shot worms, we've caught fish on bigger drop shot worms, we've caught fish on jigs. So anything that will get you on the bottom and allow you to just kind of pester a fish on a bed. Swim baits, I've heard about guys throwing some Kitex on ball heads, smaller Kitex, and doing well on beds. So all of those things kind of come into play. So there's no one magic bait. I mean, that's the part I'm trying to get to you. There really isn't one magic bait. Every day can be different. Something they bite today, they might not bite tomorrow. It really is about your casting accuracy, trying to figure out where the magic spot is on these fish, and putting your bait consistently in those little dinky spots. And that's really, the biggest key to sight fishing for bedfish. Now keep in mind, we talked about it a little bit earlier, there's a lot of water that there's fish spawning in that we can't see them. Thursday and Friday, we, just kind of went through areas looking for fish, but always keeping a bait in the water. And sure enough, we started picking up a few. And it's not by far, it's not the most effective way to fish. But, if you're having a hard time seeing fish or you don't like fishing that way, I'll guarantee you almost all the fish that you catch this time of year, if they're in less than 8 feet of water, they're either on a bed or they're with a fish that is on a bed. So you are fishing for bedfish one way or the other. But go into areas and, if you don't like bed fishing, that's fine. That's a wonderful thing about fishing. Do it the way you want to do it. Just fish how you want. It's just that right now, the majority of the fish that are being caught sight fishing. So if you don't want to fish a bed, fine. Go into an area, find some beds, then back off a little bit. Maybe put your boat in 8 feet of water, 9 feet of water. One of the tricks that's always worked for us is, if we're seeing beds consistently out underneath the boat, even if there's not a bunch of them, but we're seeing them out in 7 feet of water, but we can't see clearly enough that we're fishing for them, then that kind of tells you be fishing 7 feet of water. And you've got a really good chance of bumping into a fish and putting a bait on one's head in that depth, just by going down the bank, putting your boat in 7 feet of water, casting straight ahead, and working back. I know for a fact it works. It's worked every year that we've ever tried it. We tried it a little bit in one little area on Friday and caught fish doing it. So it does work. I'll tell you that my number one presentation personally is throwing a drop shot rig. Small worm, drop shot rig. And, this past week, just to give you an idea, we've caught them on white chartreuse, green pumpkin with gold flake, watermelon red, oxblood, June bug, and I'm probably missing a couple of other colors. It just doesn't make that much of a difference. We did see midweek that something white seemed to get a little bit better reaction than some other baits, but I really don't have a problem throwing a bait that I can't see, because I'm watching the fish and I'm watching what they're doing, how they're reacting to my cast. So it really, a baby brush hog is going to work, a little lizard is going to work. Just fish something that you're comfortable with and understand if you're going to get into it. The one thing that I'll recommend, kind of as a closing thought here, is unless you see a really big fish, I wouldn't spend a lot of time on every fish you see, because you could spend a half an hour trying to catch a 3 1/4 pound fish, which is a nice fish. If you had made 3 or 4 or 5 casts to that 3 1/4 pounder and it didn't bite, you might already be 25 yards down the bank, having caught 3 other fish in that same amount of time. So don't really get hung up on thinking that you have to catch every fish that you see, unless you're just having a really bad day, because believe me, there's always a percentage of fish that if you get the cast in the right place, they're going to bite the first time. So now, if you're still having trouble, finding what that right place is, then yeah, go ahead, practice till you figure it out. But really, that's all this is. I am not by any way, shape, or form, one of the best bed or sight fishermen up here. I do okay. I do pretty well. And actually, if I had been a very good one back in my earlier days of tournament fishing, I'd probably have a few more of those up on the wall, because I don't think I really, until 15 years ago, I don't think I ever caught a bedfish in a tournament that I know of. I was always throwing a spinnerbait as another option, especially up here at this time of year, with deep toolies, going back and just throwing a spinnerbait through bedding areas. So at any rate, that's the best I can do for you. The bite is pretty good. It isn't what it normally is, but it's pretty darn good. If you can put 5 fish in a boat, you're probably gonna have what we had, which was 18 to 22 pounds, without having a big fish. Just really good, solid fish. I mean, some of these fish, you'd think you're fishing for the female, but the way they're acting, it's the male, because it's guarding the nest as hard as it is. They're just in particularly good shape. Now, as this month goes on and the coming weeks go on, not going to be as effective. You're going to start seeing the fish get a little bit thinner, a little bit tired. So, but as long as there is somewhere on this lake right now that has clear water, has bed fishing, and they're waiting for your bait to show up and bite it. So I don't know if this helps or not, but at least it shares some thoughts with you. I'm getting a little bit on the rambly side, so I'm going to quit. So we've got a couple more days out here this next week. Looks like another little weather change. We'll see what the lake throws at us. We'll talk to you next week.